We are live. Take two. All right. Hopefully, this is coming through loud and clear and you can hear me and see me. Hey, how's it going? Lee Hayward here. And I just launched this video chat a moment ago. And for some reason, the audio wasn't coming through properly on my end. So I'm redoing the video chat here, giving it another go, right? Doing another take here with the video. And hopefully, it is coming through loud and clear. And if you can hear me and see me and all that good stuff, let me know by typing into the chat window that it is coming through loud and clear. And for those of you who are brand new to the Total Fitness Bodybuilding video chat, I want to welcome you. The way these video chats work is I'm going to be hanging out here for the next hour, answering any questions and topics of discussion that you may have when it comes to fitness and nutrition, building muscle, losing fat, any specific challenges that you may have when it comes to your diet and exercise program or anything like that. Feel free to type in those questions and topics of discussion into our chat window, and I'll do the best that I can to help you out over the course of our video chat today. So as you're logging in, just let me know, again, if you can hear me and you can see me, that's good. And also let me know if you are new to the video chat by typing in the letter N. It's always nice to have new people joining in. And if you're a regular, you've been tuning into these before, let me know by typing in the letter R to let me know that you are a regular. So we got Chris joining in, says all good. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Now, I do have a couple questions that came through earlier from one of my followers who is a regular to the video chats. This is from Sean, and he sent in some questions in advance that I want to address here before we get into answering some of the live Q&A that come through here today. So let me just bring that one up. Where is it? Yeah. Just checking here. All right, so Sean's got a question here, and I'm just going to address it here really quickly. So he says, I got a two-part question. Hopefully you'll be able to help me. He says, I'm starting a cut, and I've learned an effective strategy to burn fat is to do cardio immediately after weight training because, as you know, weight training burns through glycogen stores, and cardio leaves your body with no choice to burn fat for fuel. How much cardio do you think would be effective? And then the second part says, I do 10 minutes of cardio after lifting. And is it a good idea to cut down on the amount of sets you do during lifting? I went from 3 sets to 2 to keep the workout within the hour mark to make sure I'm not overtraining. Any advice would be appreciated. All right, great question. Now, when it comes to cutting and body fat and all that kind of stuff, you need to look at the bigger picture of what's going on here. Yes, cardio helps, and you can do cardio before or after or separate from your weight training workouts. What determines whether or not you are going to burn body fat is a calorie deficit. Like, regardless of how much cardio you do, regardless of how much weight training you do, if you're not in a calorie deficit, you're not going to be tapping into burning stored body fat. It's simple as that. Like, if you eat more calories than you consume, even if you do a shit ton of cardio, even if you do 2 hours of cardio a day, if you consume a calorie surplus, you're not going to be burning body fat, right? You will stay, your weight is going to stay in that maintenance mode. Vice versa, if you do zero cardio, but you're in a calorie deficit, you're going to tap into burning body fat. And what determines how much fat you lose and how much muscle you gain and all that, it depends on the bigger picture, the overall scenario. So, I mean, obviously, weight training is going to help to build lean muscle tissue. And in a fat loss scenario, it's actually going to help to maintain muscle as you lose body fat. And it also helps to repartition the food you eat so that it goes towards a more favorable body composition. Because if you just go on a calorie restricted diet without weight training, you could lose lean muscle, you could lose body fat. It's a combination of both. But when you're weight training and you're stimulating muscle, then it helps to encourage the muscle and help to sustain it and even build muscle as you're losing body fat. So it helps to have a more favorable body composition. But when it comes to Sean's specific question there now about cardio during a cut, you can do a lot more. 10 minutes is nothing. I'm going to be out like 10 minutes of cardio. That's like a warm up. or like a cool down. Like that's very insignificant. To put things in perspective, 10 minutes of cardio, you're going to burn about 100 calories max, depending on the intensity of the cardio. So, I mean, yes, it is significant. I mean, if you kept everything the same and you added in an extra 10 minutes of cardio, well, over the course of approximately 35 days, you would probably burn a pound of body fat, assuming everything else was the same. If you kept your diet the same, your energy expenditure the same, and everything else, but you then added in an extra 10 minutes of cardio, burning approximately 100 calories extra per day, that would tip the scales in favor of fat loss. And over the course of a little more than a month, you would burn about a pound of body fat. Now, it doesn't seem like much, but you got to look at it from the bigger picture perspective. If that's something that you can do and sustain, then that could lead to favorable body composition. And what you need to look at as well is I'm not a big fan of bulking and cutting per se, like the extreme approach. Like a lot of times when people say, well, I'm going on a cut, they think of extreme calorie restriction. And then they think of, I'm going on a bulk. They think of, slamming back a lot of extra calories and creating these big, changes in calorie intake and trying to force your body to change, meaning force it to burn body fat or force it to gain muscle. And the body doesn't respond favorably to forcing, like trying to force change. Because when you try and force something, it's very often uncomfortable and it's not sustainable. And it usually ends up backfiring over the long term. And I'll give you a prime example. Like think of people who go on a diet, right? They go on a massive calorie cut. They're trying to do a lot of cardio. They're really kind of burning the candle at both ends. Yeah, it may work initially and you may see some fast results, especially as you deplete your glycogen stores and you lose a lot of weight from that. Because when it comes to glycogen, for every gram of stored glycogen you have in your system, and glycogen is just a fancy way of saying stored carbohydrates. When carbohydrates get stored in the muscle cells and in the liver as stored glycogen, it retains 3 to 4 grams of water. So for every gram of glycogen, you retain 3 to 4 grams of water. Now, you deplete your glycogen stores, you also deplete all that water, you lose a lot of weight. That's why people who go on a keto diet or any form of low carb dieting, they're like, oh my God, I lost 10 pounds in the first week. It doesn't mean you lost 10 pounds of body fat. It means you just literally deflated your body and lost 10 pounds of glycogen and water. Now, maybe a small portion of that was body fat, but the majority of it was glycogen and water. It's not actual body fat. I mean, to burn 10 pounds of body fat, that's a lot of freaking calories. Like well, there's 3,500 calories in a pound, right? So, I mean, times that by 10. You didn't create that big of a calorie deficit by simply cutting carbs. No, right? I mean, like you can't drop weight that fast as a lot of people think, but you can see fast changes when it comes to water. And vice versa, when you go on a bulk and you start eating excess calories and you fill out your glycogen stores, a lot of the weight you gain is simply water and glycogen being pulled into the muscle. So anytime you see rapid changes in the short term, rapid gains or rapid losses, it's usually not lean muscle that you're gaining and it's usually not body fat that you're losing. It's varying fluctuating levels of water and glycogen. That's the initial fluctuations that you see. And this is happening all the time. We're looking at the long-term trend, right? So that's what we want to focus on. We want to kind of differentiate between the short-term fluctuations of water and glycogen and actually looking at real body composition changes. So you need to look at a bigger picture and thinking of creating that sustainable caloric deficit. And a good benchmark to shoot for is try and scale back your calories by about 10%. Like that's more than enough to start and see how your body responds, right? So I mean just focus on making better food choices, scaling back. And how I would recommend doing this is first off, look at your overall eating and see like where can I optimize what I'm currently doing? And think of like, is there anything in my nutrition plan that shouldn't be there? Like, is there some junk food or some, not so good things in there that I could easily clean up? And that's the first step when it comes to creating a going on a cut, if you will, is just to clean up the obvious stuff. Like if you're Friday night pizza and beer or potato chips and things like that, well, obviously, cut the obvious stuff out, right? Just cut the simple stuff out right away, and that will lead to a favorable change. Once you have that in place, then you can start trying to optimize things even further and look at like how can I make better choices? Like how can I have better sources of quality nutrition more nutrient dense foods and less empty calorie foods. And that's what you want to focus on, like kind of filling up on the good stuff, and that will naturally eliminate some of the bad stuff. So that's what you want to focus on first, is optimizing your overall nutrition. Simple things that I like to focus on: protein and vegetables with every meal. Like that's a simple habit. That's one that we really go in deep with the whole Muscle After 40 Blueprint program. Protein and veggies with each meal. That's kind of like the foundation. And once you have that in place, then we can kind of optimize it beyond that. But that's like an 80-20 rule, meaning like that's a 20% action step that'll give you 80% of the results. If you just do that with each meal, then you'll be naturally filling up on the good stuff and minimizing the intake of the bad stuff. Because if you're eating protein and vegetables, drinking adequate water, you're filling up and satiating your body and nourishing it on the cellular level. So then you don't crave as much junk food. Whereas most people, when they go on a cut, they think of, what do I have to avoid? Oh, I'm not allowed to eat this. I'm not allowed to eat that. I'm not allowed to eat junk food. I'm not allowed to have this. I'm not allowed to eat carbs. I'm not allowed what? Like once you start obsessing over what you're not allowed to have, it does two things. One, it actually makes you want those things more, because whatever you're bringing to your conscious awareness, you're going to want more of. So if you're consciously thinking about what you're not allowed to have, like I'm not allowed to have this, I'm not allowed to have that, it actually makes you want it more. Like prime example, if I told you you can never have pizza ever again, you start all of a sudden you'll start thinking, man, I want pizza. Like just bringing it to your conscious awareness, it just makes you want to desire it even more. So when you put rules and restrictions and saying I'm not allowed to have something, it actually backfires and it makes you want that more. And then you're relying on willpower to deprive yourself of that. And then it's just a matter of like, how long can you suffer it out? How long can you rely on willpower and forcing yourself not to have those things? Whereas if you take a reverse psychology approach, and instead of thinking of all the stuff you're not allowed to have and focusing on what am I going to fill up on, what am I allowed to have? Hey, I'm allowed to have all this lean protein. I'm allowed to have all this, vegetables. I'm allowed to have fruits and quality carbohydrates, and fill up on all these good high volume nutrient dense foods that's going to fuel and nourish and fill your body up and satiate your appetite. If you fill up on that, then you just naturally have less room for the junk food. Now, with that being said, if at the end of filling up on the good stuff, if you still crave a little bit of junk food, I mean, have some in moderation, kind of get those cravings out of your system, but don't obsess over it. And again, this is something that we really go into detail with in the whole Muscle After 40 Blueprint. We've got a full step-by-step, system in place to take people through this, to make it a lifestyle. So it's not just going on another diet. It's actually reprogramming your subconscious and kind of reprogramming your compass, if you will. So you start to do the right things automatically without conscious effort and willpower. And that's what makes it sustainable. So that's the big thing. The nutrition is hands down is going to have 10 times the impact on your fat loss versus cardio. Now, with that being said, does cardio help? Absolutely. Cardio is a big calorie burner, and you'll burn more calories from cardio than you will from weight training. And I know from when people hear that, they kind of like think, whoa, what do you mean? Because we've kind of been brainwashed into thinking like weight training is the holy grail of exercise. But from a calories in, calories out point of view, you will burn way more calories doing cardio than you will weight training. To kind of put some numbers out there, with a weight training workout, you're burning about 10 calories per set. Now, again, that's a generic number. I'll totally admit, because I mean, obviously, a bigger person is going to burn more calories than a smaller person, and a hard exercise like squats is going to burn more calories than a easy exercise like bicep curls. But a general rule of thumb that you can kind of just use as a guideline: 10 calories per set. That's about what you're burning. So if you go into the gym and you do 20 sets, you burn 200 calories, right? Give or take. It's in that ballpark. It's not a big number. Whereas if you do cardio, you can burn way more calories. Like the average guy just doing a moderate intensity cardio workout could easily burn 500 calories in an hour. Whereas you go in the gym and you do 20 sets over the course of an hour. Like say the calories in, you burn more calories doing the cardio. So if you're looking to expend more calories through exercise, cardio is the way to do it. And the cool thing about cardio is you can do it without negatively hindering your weight training within reason. Now, I'm not saying like you can go out and do extreme amounts of cardio where you're like a marathon runner or a triathlete, getting ready for doing massive amounts of exercise and not have that negatively impact your workout. But you can do moderate amounts. Like you could easily do an hour of cardio a day without any negative impacts to your weight training. And I'm not saying that you start with that, right? Especially if you're new to doing cardio, but that's the kind of numbers you want to be looking at. And when you look at a lot of competitive bodybuilders, like an hour of cardio a day is kind of like benchmark for most of them. Some of them work up to doing more than that. I know in my case, when I was getting ready for a competition, I'd usually start off with about an hour of cardio per day as my baseline. And then the closer I get to the competition, depending on how things were progressing, if I needed to put the push on to speed up fat loss, I would up it to about 2 hours of cardio a day. So, I mean, you can use this as an extra tool in the toolbox to amplify fat burning. And as far as the best time to do it, it really doesn't matter. I mean, I know like Sean mentioned there, well, hey, if I do cardio at the end of my weight training workout, I'm going to burn more body fat. But it's calories in versus calories out over the course of the day. It's not like in nitpicking over like, oh, if I burn it in the morning or if I burn it after the workout or if I burn it before the workout or if I burn it in the evening. It's over the course of the day. Like that's what you need to look at. You need to look at it from a bigger picture perspective. If you create a calorie deficit over the long term, you're going to burn body fat over the long term. And this is where a lot of people can get confused with things. And sometimes they get mixed results. Because I'll give you a prime example of one that I see a lot of guys struggling with. Think of intermittent fasting. A lot of people are brainwashed into thinking, well, as long as I restrict my feeding to, a certain window, like I only eat for 4 hours a day and then I fast for 20 hours a day, then I'm not going to gain fat and I'll be able to, eat what I want and lose weight. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. It's not when you eat, it's what you eat and how much you eat. Because if you consume a calorie surplus in 4 hours, you're still going to be in a calorie surplus and you're not going to burn body fat. Whereas if you spaced out your meals and you were eating 6 meals a day, but you were in a calorie deficit, you're going to burn body fat. Again, it's calories in, calories out over the long term. It's not, the timing is secondary. Now, I'm not saying timing doesn't matter because in certain situations it does, but you need to get the big rocks in first and look at the bigger picture. And the big one is creating a calorie deficit. So in Sean's case, just focus on expending more energy and making better food choices. That's step one, right? Like get that nailed down first. And then all these nitty gritty detail things like, oh, like when should I do it and what's like, this is how I would recommend structuring your workouts. I'd recommend doing weight training one day and cardio the next. That would be a good place to start for most people. So if you're looking to get some daily exercise, weight training one day, cardio the next is a great way because with the weight training workouts, you're stimulating muscle growth, but you're also breaking down the muscle tissue, placing stress on the joints, tendons, and ligaments, and that requires some time for the body to recover. Cardio is more of an active recovery type of exercise. It's not as stressful on the central nervous system, especially if it's low intensity cardio, and it's a better calorie burner. So it really helps to aid with the fat burning. So alternating high intensity weight training with low intensity cardio and doing it day for day, great way to keep yourself active every day and to maximize calorie expenditure and to reap the benefits of daily exercise while still making progress. Once you're doing that, then if you want to bump it up even more, then you could still do the weight training every other day, but you could do daily cardio. And daily cardio, especially if it's low intensity, is fine because it's not stressing out the body. Like if you go for a walk, like you don't end the walk feeling, oh man, that was I killed it, oh my legs are pumped and I can't sit down because my legs are so sore because I went for a walk. Or like most people do not feel drained after a walk, especially if you're in decent shape to begin with. Like you actually feel invigorated, you feel rejuvenated, and it's active recovery. So you're out there, you're burning calories, but you're not stressing the body. You're not beating yourself up by going out there and walking. So that's one of the best ways to tap into burning more body fat is just move more. Get out and do more activity in general. And it doesn't have to be always structured cardio workouts like where you schedule it into the calendar and you change into your gym clothes and all that. I mean, the cool thing about walking is like you can do it anywhere, anytime. Like haul on your sneakers, go outside and go, right? Walk around the block on your lunch break at work, right? I mean, like before you go to work in the morning, go for a little walk. On your lunch break, go for a walk, right? Take the stairs instead of the elevator, like simple stuff, and give yourself permission to just get off your ass and move more. And that will have a huge impact in your overall calorie expenditure and tipping the scale in favor of a calorie deficit versus a calorie surplus. Another cool thing about this is I very often use walking as a tool to control my cravings as well. Like I can give you a prime example. Like when I was getting ready for my bodybuilding show back last summer, in the evenings, sometimes when you're sitting around and you getting the munchies, that nighttime munchies, those nighttime cravings start to kick in. What I would do, especially if it was a nice evening out, I'd just haul on my sneakers and go for a walk around the block. And I found that just getting outside and going for a walk, it took my mind off eating. And of course, it got me away from the kitchen so that I'm not tempted by the food. And simply just going for a walk around the block, one, the light activity actually suppresses the appetite. You'll find that like when you do mild exercise, it can actually have an appetite suppressing effect to it, and then it distracts your mind. So like if you find yourself in the evening, you're sitting around, you're watching TV or you're scrolling through your phone or something and you're getting pecky, and then you go and you're looking in the refrigerator seeing what you can eat, like it's kind of like eating out of boredom, mindless eating. If you get into that trap, get outside and go for a walk or just do something like kind of distract yourself away from the food. And very often, once you get away from it, then the hunger sensations subside. You distract yourself and you start thinking about other things, and then you're not focusing on the food. And it's actually a great way to bump up the calorie expenditure and minimize the calorie consumption. So that's one thing that I was doing, and it worked great. Every evening, after dinner, before I'd go to bed, I'd just go for a little easy walk around the block, right? Nothing too intense, right? Just go for a walk, and it helped to distract me and it helped to bump up my calorie expenditure. So, bottom line, walking is one of the best things you can do. And the more you do it, the better. Now, if you want to do it after your workout as a way to bump up the calorie expenditure, by all means, do it. If you want to do it before the workout as a warm up and a calorie expenditure, do it. I mean, bottom line, the more you do it, the better it's going to be. Another question he had there was asking about exercise volume and cutting back on these number of sets. I wouldn't cut back on the number of sets. I would keep that as a constant and look at adding in the extra cardio to kind of bump up the overall calorie expenditure. The body can handle a lot more than you give it credit for. Like a lot of people are thinking, well, if I exercise for more than an hour, I'm going to overtrain and I'm going to lose all my gains and all that. No, man, the body can handle so much more. Like it really can. Like we're brainwashed into this overtraining uh, mindset, thinking, oh, I can't do too much. I'm going to break down my muscle tissue. Muscle is not as fragile as a lot of people think. I mean, like even the old school guys back in the day, I mean, they were in the gym training for hours on end, and they, the quote unquote pumping iron days, and the physiques that those guys built in the pumping iron days. I mean, most of us would love to have physiques like that. So, bottom line, your body can handle a lot more volume than you give it credit for. But you just want to build up to that volume gradually. Don't try and jump into it, like diving in head first into the deep end. Build it up gradually over time, but realize you can handle cardio, you can handle weight training, and you can still recover from it. So focus on more activity, more calorie expenditure, and making better food choices. And I think you'd be on the right track for a cut. Now, I know that was a big, long-winded response to a question. So if you would like some practical action steps, or if you have any questions about what I covered and you went on to discuss it, feel free to reach out to me. You can send me an email and we can discuss this in more detail. And I actually have a free PDF guide that explains exactly how I went about, losing my gut and getting back in shape and implementing these strategies for myself as well as my coaching students. It outlines how the whole Muscle After 40 blueprint works. And that's a free PDF download. It's called Ripped After 40. And if you want a copy of it, I have a link to it down in the description below this video, or you can head on over to my website at leehayward.com, and there's a link there where you can download it as well. But that would certainly help to clarify a lot of the stuff that we just discussed here. All right, so that was a big, long-winded one. Now, I'm getting into some of the questions that came through. So we got a lot of people joining in, a lot of questions coming through. So let's jump into it. What we got? We have Chris. We have Waj Ali, Dan, another Dan. We got Dan Kong and Dan Nicholson. And Dan N is saying, Lee, thanks for the kudos on Strava, a longtime follower of yours. Congrats on the recent success in cycling. I like you. I bodybuild and cycle, but I prefer cycling. How do you manage both? All right, great question. For those of you who've been following me, especially over on Facebook, and if you follow me on Strava, which I know some do, but usually you're already involved with endurance training if you're using Strava, because it tends to be more of an endurance training app than anything. But cycling is something that I've really started to take a passion for over the past couple years. Now, for just to explain how it all works, like I've been riding a bicycle since I was a kid. Like I started off, BMX biking, and I got into mountain biking, and I didn't stop. Like even growing up throughout my teenage years, throughout my 20s and 30s, like I didn't stop riding a bike. And I used cycling as a primary form of cardio when I was getting ready for bodybuilding shows. So a lot of times when I'd be doing competitions, just to change up my cardio, I go for walks, I go for bike rides, I do cardio at the gym. I mean, I just mix it up because where I was doing a lot of cardio, getting ready for bodybuilding shows, I wanted variety in that cardio to keep it fun and interesting. So I've always been involved with cycling, but not from a performance point of view. I always used it like a fat burning supplement. It was always like weight training was the priority, and then cardio, whether that was walking, cycling, or cardio machines at the gym, that was just an add-on. It was a fat burning supplement. And that works well. If your main goal is body recomposition, weight training as the priority, and adding in the cardio as a fat burning supplement. And it was mostly long duration, low intensity cardio. Now I've kind of made the switch where I'm focusing more on performance cycling, more longer distance, higher intensity. And just, last month I actually competed in a road cycling race, actually won my division in the road cycling race, which was really cool. First time I ever won a race. And I never thought in a million years that you'd see my name as first place on a road cycling race. But I've really made the switch to prioritizing cycling. And now it's kind of like the tables are turned. The cycling is my main form of training. And then the weight training is kind of like supplementing the cycling, filling in the gaps, preventing injury, keeping my core and all this, the muscles strong that don't get trained on the bike. So, I mean, I've kind of switched gears because that's just something I'm really interested in now. And it's a new passion of mine. But how do you combine the both? You need to look at it from the bigger picture perspective again and realize when it comes to any form of cross training where you're doing multiple forms of exercise or multiple sports, it's not like you have 100% recovery for everything you do. It's not like you got 100% recovery for cycling and 100% recovery for weight training and 100% recovery for whatever other sports and activities you do. You got 100% total, right? That's it. You've got 100% recovery, and you got to figure out how are you going to allocate that recovery for all your different sports and activities that you want to do. So if you want to kind of generalize and be a part of multiple different activities, then you're going to have to just break it down so that you're doing a little bit of a lot instead of prioritizing one specific form of exercise. So you got to have to choose what's the most important thing for you. And if it's cycling, and then you mentioned Dan did in his question there, he says he prefers cycling, then obviously that's the priority. Then focus on that. And then I would recommend supplementing those cycling workouts with weight training, especially focusing on areas that get neglected. And I'll give you a prime example, like your neck, your upper back, your core, obviously arms and shoulders and all those areas. Like those are things that are pretty much dormant on a bicycle. I mean, it's all heavy lower body training. I mean, of course, I'm not saying that you don't want to train your lower body in the gym. You still want to do it, but do so in a complementary fashion. So I wouldn't be going in the gym and doing high volume, high repetition leg workouts. I would go into the gym and focus on heavy, low repetition leg workouts so that you're providing a complementary stimulus, because you're getting lots of high volume, high repetition on the cycle. You want to focus on more of that strength and power aspect that you're not getting. So that's what you would do in the gym. You focus more on that. And then, of course, building up those weak links to help strengthen all the areas that you would be working while you're cycling. So that's what I would do. And that's how I do it myself, right? Like I'm focusing on complementing both. And ideally, you would do like cardio one day, weight training the next, cardio one day, weight training the next. That would be ideal. Now, I know that doesn't always work out. Some days you may have to combine workouts, but in the perfect world, that's how I would do it. You probably have 3 cycling workouts, 3 weight training workouts, take one day of full rest and recovery. And that would be a great way to complement both. And then with the weight training, focus on doing exercises that are more strength and power based, and not so much high volume, high repetition based, unless it's again filling in those gaps like upper back, core, hips. These are some of the weak links that don't get that get neglected when you're on the bike. You want to focus on strengthening those in the gym so that you prevent any future issues. Because a lot of times, when you're in those fixed positions for prolonged periods of time, you may get stiff neck and stiff, upper back and things like that. So you want to make sure that you're keeping those areas mobile and healthy, and incorporating strength training in those. But that's how I go about it. Again, you got to think of the bigger picture and making sure that you're adequate recovery for both. And if you do find that you do feel the overtraining symptoms setting in, meaning that your performance starts to suffer, then you need to do a deload, right? Maybe do a deload with both the cycling and the weight training. And this generally works in waves. Like you'll probably be able to make steady progress for a few weeks, and then you might kind of hit a plateau. Then you might need to do a deload, and then build up again, do a deload. So that's something that you can incorporate as well. Moving on. All right. Andrew's joining in. Says, finally recovering from my ED. When I started lifting weights a year ago, I used to listen to people saying eat 200 calories surplus, but I didn't realize I was under eating. I increased by nearly 700 calories now, and I'm feeling much better. Finally able to put on muscle. I think I was far too lean and under eating to gain any size or strength before. That's huge. And I should mention, recovering from ED, that stands for eating disorder in this case. It's not erectile difficulties or erectile dysfunction, right? You got to be careful when you're using acronyms, right? Because an acronym can mean a lot of things, right? Like, especially if you're talking to guys in their 40s and 50s and beyond, if they're talking about ED, it's not usually an eating disorder. It's usually an erectile dysfunction, which is just as bad, all right? But in Andrew's case, I know because he's a regular to the chat, an eating disorder. And that is huge. Nutrition is such a big piece of the puzzle when it comes to all forms of athletic performance, whether that's endurance training, strength training, whether it's, building muscle, even when it comes to burning body fat. Like, you have to fuel your body. You can't starve yourself and think like starving and depriving is the way to go. You have to nourish your body, especially nourishing it at the cellular level, filling up on that high nutrient dense foods. The only stuff that you want to be minimizing is those empty calorie processed junk foods. That's the stuff that you want to minimize. But when it comes to the high nutrient dense, natural unprocessed foods, you need that stuff. You need to fuel and nourish your body in order to build muscle, build the metabolism, and of course have the strength and energy to train and recover. And if you are under eating, then you're just shortchanging the whole process, right? You can't overtrain and under eat and think that you're going to get faster results. It ain't going to happen. You're just going to burn yourself out and dig yourself into a rut, right? So I'm so happy that you're finally, getting this under control, and that you've actually, got yourself now to the point where you're eating and fueling your body and nourishing it, and not just simply trying to deprive it and create that unnecessary calorie deficit. We got William joining in. This is Lee. Last month, I injured my lower left back while doing cable rows. The next day, I couldn't walk or sit without having pain. After a week, it went away. Today, I was doing a dumbbell bench, and the pain is back. While the pain isn't as bad as the first time the injury happened, I still get heavy pains when I try to bend over. Do you know which body part I got injured and how to avoid injuries? Did I not warm up properly? Thanks. All right, that's a loaded question there. It sounds like, the lower back area, which I'm assuming you've injured. There's a few things that could be. I mean, it's probably the spinal erectors, right? Those are the muscles that run up the lower back, and that's the ones that are responsible for arching your back. Like if you do a hyperextension or something like that, those are the muscles that come into play. They come into play as stabilizer muscles anytime you're doing rowing movements. They're basically the muscles that run up the lower back and stabilize your core. Because when we consider the core, I mean, you got the abdominals, you got the obliques, and then you got the spinal erectors. So, I mean, it's that whole base. So chances are you probably strained or pulled something in the spinal erectors. It could also be a nerve issue. I mean, you may have an impinged nerve. That's another thing that can happen. And that's not necessarily due to a muscle strain or injury. It's due to a nerve impingement. And there's numerous things that could potentially cause that. And they can be very painful. And it's just causes that nagging, aching sensation in that area. So again, I without knowing and seeing you and just kind of like trying to diagnose it from a, a YouTube comment here, it's probably one of those issues. Either you strain the spinal erectors or you have some sort of nerve impingement. The big thing that you want to focus on is avoiding aggravating that any further. So if there's any particular movements that cause pain or discomfort, don't do them, right? Try and find another exercise variation to do, or just lay off those particular exercises in general. So like when it comes to back exercises and things like that, like any type of thing where you have to engage your core and lower back, I would purposely avoid that. So, for example, like dumbbell bench presses, even though it's not a back exercise, when you pick up those dumbbells and then swing them back and you get yourself positioned on the bench, you got to engage the lower back just to stabilize and to lift those weights up and to get yourself in position. So, scrap the dumbbell bench press and then focus on maybe a machine press, maybe like a chest press machine, whether it's a weight stack or a hammer strength or something like that, where the you're already in position, your back is supported by the backrest and the pad, and then you can just focus on working the isolated muscles, in this case, the chest. Same thing when it comes to any back work. I wouldn't do any cable rows or barbell rows or dumbbell rows, or heck no, don't do any deadlifts. Like if you got any lower back pain, don't do any of those. Focus on doing things where one, your back is supported. So maybe some sort of chest supported row, or even just exercises where you're working from decompressing the spine, such as like an overhead lat pull down, things like that. Focus on working around that injury to the best of your ability and avoid aggravating it. I would probably even avoid doing direct abdominal work as well, because when you engage the abdominals, you're also indirectly placing stress on the lower back area as well, because that has to balance. It's like agonist and antagonist muscles. So you got to be very selective with what you're doing for the next little while. And I mean, who knows how long this could last? It really, when it comes to injury recovery, it's not like there's a one size fits all answer. Like, oh, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. Right? It's not that predictable. I mean, sometimes it may last a week, sometimes it might last a month, sometimes it might last several weeks or even several months. I mean, who knows? I really have no idea. It depends on how severe the injury is. But you want to be very careful in this whole process, because when you have a minor injury, this is the critical stage, because what you do now is going to determine whether that minor injury heals, or if you do too much too soon and you're not careful, you could take that minor injury and turn it into a major injury. And this is what you see often happen. Like sometimes, I'll give you a prime example. Like guys are bench pressing in the gym, and I use bench press as an example because it's the ego exercise and it's the one exercise that everybody lifts too damn heavy with. Right. So they're bench pressing, trying to set a new 1 rep max or something like that, and they end up straining their chest or shoulder tie-in area, which is very common. Right. So they pull their chest and that. And then they say, well, I'll take a week or so off. And then they take a week or so off, and it starts to feel a little better. And then they say, well, I better go back and don't want to lose any ground, right? I don't want to lose any strength. So then they try and, hit a new 1 rep max again. And then now, next thing you know, now they really screwed it up, right? Whether they made a more serious muscle pull or strain, or worse, even a full-on pec tear. And that's very often what happens. Is it starts off with some little minor injury or minor tweak first, and then you're too eager to get back into the gym and back to training again, and then you end up taking that minor tweak and turn it into a full-blown injury. So this is like the check engine light on, right? This is your warning sign. Like, hey, your body's telling you, be careful. Something's wrong. We have pain in this area. Do not push it, right? So this is the warning lights flashing. Listen to those warning signals and work around it to the best of your ability. And then when you do get back into doing those exercises, start off ridiculously light. Like I'm talking like baby weights, warm up weights, and just gradually go through the motions and build it up over the course of several workouts. Don't just jump back into the weights that you were lifting before. So, I mean, you mentioned you heard it doing cable rows. Well, like I don't know how much you were lifting, but let's just for argument's sake, let's just say you were lifting 150 pounds on the cable row machine. Well, when you go back to doing cable rows, don't jump into 150 pounds on the cable row machine. Like start back with 50 pounds or even less. Like just literally go through the motions with baby weights and just see, okay, can I do the motion? Can I use a full range and actually feel the muscle stretch and contract? And can I go through the movement without it causing pain or aggravation? If you can, great. Then next workout, go up a little heavier and a little heavier. And then over the course of several weeks, build it back up slowly to your old weight. Don't just try and jump back into lifting the same weight too fast and too soon, because that's going to just reopen the door for that injury again. And don't be so eager to try and make up lost ground, saying like, oh well, I've been training light for a few weeks, I'm afraid I'm losing muscle, so I better put the pedal to the metal and try to make up lost ground. No, I mean that's just going to aggravate things even further. And the only thing that's going to slow your progress is an injury, right? I mean, if you do easy workouts and don't push to failure, like in the greater scheme of things, that's not going to set you back, because I mean, you can still go back and train harder the next day. But if you go in and do too much too soon and you get injured, you're not going back and training harder the next day. Depending on the injury, you could be laid up for weeks or months, or in some cases, it may never fully recover. So you want to be very careful with that. So that's the best thing to do, is just work around it, doing more machine exercises and things that don't engage your core, and just literally focus on working around it and avoiding aggravating it to any more extensive degree. And if possible, I would even get it looked after. I mean, like if this is something that continues to become a problem and you don't feel it healing up on its own, if this continues to cause pain, then check with a physiotherapist or a chiropractor or someone who deals with this type of stuff in person, someone who can see you and do and it's a physical examination on and see exactly what it is that you've got done. And hopefully they'll be able to give you some insights if you don't find it healing up on its own. So give the tips I suggested to try first, and if it does start to ease up and you're noticing improvement, then maybe it will heal up on its own, and fingers crossed it will. But if it doesn't, then by all means, look into getting it checked out by a professional who can see you in person. All right, moving on. Let's see what else we got there. Eagle Eye John saying, just wondering why I lost muscle doing a 10-10 rep tempo, speed, explosive reps, good form. I found a lot better even from strength. Let me read that again. Wondering why I lost muscle doing a 10-10 rep tempo, speed, explosive reps with good form. If you're training consistently, like you're not going to lose muscle because you changed your rep tempo. If you're losing muscle, it's if you're losing muscle, it's probably because you're malnourished or you're in some big, massive calorie deficit. Like you're not going to lose muscle because you changed your set and rep pattern or your rep tempo. What you may find if you change things up, like you may not get as much of a muscle pump, and then you're thinking, well, because my muscles didn't get as pumped as they did when I did, say, higher repetitions and I'm doing lower repetitions, well, I must be losing muscle. But no, that's not the way it works. Like a pump is just blood being pumped into a muscle. It's not really gaining or losing size. It's just temporary blood volume being pumped into a muscle. So my guess, based on your question and without actually talking to you in person, my guess just from your comment there is you changed up your rep pattern. You're doing more fast, explosive reps, not the slow and controlled reps. So you're probably not getting as much of a muscle pump. And because you're not getting as much of a muscle pump, they don't feel as tight and full after a set. Like if, just prime example, like if you do a set of bicep curls and you just do some fast, really explosive curls, or you do slow and controlled, time under tension, really, get a lot of blood flow and pump, you're going to feel more muscle fullness and tightness after a slow, controlled muscle pumping set versus a quick, fast, and explosive set. Now, both have merits, right? I mean, I'm not saying one is good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just a different style of training, and it depends on what it is you're trying to train for. Like from an athletic point of view, speed and explosiveness is good, right? I mean, you want to be able to have that fast explosiveness. From a hypertrophy point of view, the slow and controlled time under tension is good. And it also depends on the exercise. Certain exercises respond better to more slow and controlled time under tension movements. Other exercises respond better to faster explosive movements. So my guess is you change the rep tempo, you're doing faster explosive reps, you're probably just not getting as much of a muscle pump, and you're confusing lack of a pump with losing muscle when it's not really the case. Like, unless you stop training entirely, and like, you're not going to lose muscle, right? Like, muscle is not that fragile where, oh, I switched up my tempo and now I've lost muscle. Like, no, I mean, muscle is not that fragile where you like, unless you like took 2 months off training entirely, okay, yeah, then you're going to lose muscle. But just because you changed up your tempo or your set and rep pattern, no, you're not losing muscle from that. Moving on. Cheddar Bob. Gotta love the name. Hey there, I'm working on a cut to lose more weight. Do you have recommendations for something that goes well with coffee? I mainly eat peanut butter sandwich, but would like to get variety. Well, I'm going to tell you something. If you're working on a cut to lose weight, peanut butter sandwiches are not the ideal food because that is a very calorie dense food. I would look for a lower calorie dense option. One, you could look for powder peanut butter instead of regular peanut butter, like PB2 or PB and me is different forms of powder peanut butter, and that would be a nice alternative. Um, because regular peanut butter is super calorie dense. Like, for the amount of volume you consume versus the calories you consume, it ain't a fat burning food by no means. Like, that's something that's going to pile on the fat, not gain or not lose fat. So make some better choices there, filling up in the high volume, lower calorie dense foods. But as for coffee, do a search for Lee Hayward high protein coffee. Like, after this video is done, just go in on YouTube and search Lee Hayward high protein coffee. I've got a few videos there showing that, and that's really tasty. And basically what it is, it's using a milk frother and blending up protein powder in with your coffee, and it adds a really nice flavor to it. So, like, for example, if you put like vanilla protein powder with black coffee, it kind of gives it like a cappuccino, vanilla cappuccino type flavor. If you're using chocolate protein and coffee, kind of gives it like a cafe mocha flavor to it. But it's a really nice way to add some protein and also add some flavor to the coffee, and it's kind of like a tasty treat without causing any setbacks to your fat burning. All right, what else we got there? Moses Escobar is joining in and sponsored the chat. Thank you for your support. Much appreciated. Says, good afternoon. I recently noticed that my right knee inside hurts when I'm doing barbell squats. Doesn't hurt with lunges or other leg extensions. What are your thoughts? You must have strained the tendons, and it's like the meniscus. The inside of the knee, that's like maybe you twisted it a certain way or whatever, and that could cause it. What I would recommend, first off, any exercise that causes pain or discomfort, don't do it, right? Find other exercises that you can do instead. So, prime example, you say, it hurts when I'm doing squats. Don't squat. All right. I know that sounds so obvious, but it's true. If it hurts when you're squatting, don't squat. And he says it doesn't hurt when you do lunges or other leg extensions or other leg exercises. Well, do those other leg exercises. Right? Focus on movement patterns that do not cause pain and aggravation. And your body is very good at telling you this. Like, just listen to your body. It'll give you those warning signs, right? When you're feeling the pain and discomfort, listen to it. Don't try and be tough and work through the pain. Listen to it and respect the pain. And then if you can do other movements, like maybe you can do leg extensions or leg curls, or maybe you can do like, say you mentioned lunges and stuff like that. Those are all fine exercises. You don't have to squat. I mean, if squats are great if you can do them and you can do them pain-free and with good form and all that, but you don't have to do them. You can get great results with other exercises instead. So that's what I would focus on. And another thing you might want to look into as well is just general mobility in overall. Like, kind of figure out like what is the root cause for that knee injury. And if this is something, I mean, feel free to email me if you want, and we can chat about it through email. But you know, this is something you got to think of. Like, Did it come on all of a sudden? Did anything in particular happen? Like, did you fall or stumble or twist your ankle or twist your knee or something? Like, was there any sudden jerky movement that probably caused the knee or something to twist and strain those tendons and ligaments? Right. If that happened, then of course, that kind of could explain the root cause of the pain. But if nothing out of the ordinary happened and it just kind of developed slowly over time, and now you get to the point where okay, you're getting this nagging knee pain, then we need to think of like what could be the root cause of that. And it may be some sort of muscle imbalance. Like maybe you're doing more work for the quadriceps and not enough for the hamstrings, or maybe you're not doing enough work for hip mobility and flexibility. And certain muscles are getting overworked compared to others, and it could be pulling on the tendons and ligaments, unevenly. So that's why I'm always a huge fan of working the body in balance and proportion, agonist and antagonist, and not only strengthening but flexibility work as well. So we really need to see like what is the root cause of this knee pain to begin with, and then try and deal with it from there. But again, the simple answer in the short term, avoid aggravating it any further. So whatever causes pain and discomfort, don't do it. And that would also include with cardio as well. So I would avoid any high impact cardio, be that running or anything, that you find jarring on the knees, right? Try to do some low impact or no impact cardio. For example, like the elliptical machine or maybe a stationary bike or something along those lines where there's no impact on the knee joint whatsoever. That would be helpful and probably more therapeutic for the joint as well. But feel free to email me. And again, I got my email address down in the description below this video, right? If you got any questions or you want to elaborate on this in more detail, because it's, I'd like to know more about it so I can give you a more thorough answer, if you will. But based on what you shared with me there, that's what I would recommend. Moving on. Let's see what else we got. I'm almost out of tea. When the tea is gone, the tea with me video chat is over. We have Charles joining in. I'm having trouble with a muscle-mind connection when working out my back and my chest. All right, that makes a lot of sense, especially with the back. The back is one of those areas. It's out of sight, it's out of mind. It's hard to visualize the back. The chest, not so much, because you can still see your chest, but you may have a hard time feeling that mind-muscle connection. Now, one thing I want to elaborate on is as your muscles get more developed, it's going to be easier to feel them working. So when you're in this early phase of training, like just again, I don't know how long you've been working out for, but if you're new to working out, it's usually hard to get that mind muscle connection. It's not something that you just go into the gym day one and like, oh, I got a perfect mind muscle connection with all of my body parts. No, it's something you got to develop. You got to be in tune with it. And the bigger the muscle, the more easier it's going to be to develop that mind muscle connection. So this is something that will evolve as your physical development evolves. And I can attest to this. Like in my early days of training, there was certain exercises I would do and I would not get a pump or not feel the muscles working. And I was just kind of like going through the motions with it. And then it's almost like once you start to develop some muscle and strength in that area, it's almost like you flick a switch. And then all of a sudden like, oh, now I can feel that muscle activating that I couldn't feel before. So you'll notice that with certain body parts, as they become stronger, more developed, and you become more in tune with the muscles, you'll be able to build more of a mind muscle connection. But in the short term, what you can focus on, lighter weights, slower tempo, and really focus on squeezing and stretching the muscle with each repetition. So going through that full range of motion and focusing on really squeeze and stretch. So in the case of the back, when you're doing a row, like extend your arms all the way out so that you feel your lats and your back muscles fully stretch in the bottom position. And then pull your elbows all the way in, right? And really focus on getting your elbows and shoulder blades retracted behind you and squeeze the back. So stretch and squeeze and kind of go through that motion with all your exercises. Same with like overhead pulls and stuff like that, right? Extend all the way up, stretch. And then when you're pulling down, really focus on pulling your elbows back, retracting your shoulder blades together and squeezing. And this will help to activate the back. When it comes to the chest, right? Same idea there. You really want to focus on expanding your chest. So like if you're doing a bench press or flies or anything like that, think of, expanding your chest, right? Get the chest activated, puff it out. And then when you are doing like a bench press or a fly or something like that, really focus on stretch and squeeze, and really try and create that tension in the muscle. Even going through the movements with no weights at all. Like, hey, while you're sitting down watching this now, right? I mean, you could even try that now. Like, purposely try and flex your chest. See if you can actually flex and feel those muscles contract. Purposely try and flex your back and see if you can feel those muscles contract. If you can get the contraction and start to feel the tension with no weight at all, once you start adding weight, then it's just going to amplify it even more. And then you'll be able to manipulate that through different exercises and different movement patterns and different ranges of motion. But you want to start to develop the ability to flex and contract the muscles without any weight at all. And this is something where bodybuilders have such an edge over other strength athletes when it comes to developing the muscles, because in bodybuilding, they're posing their body, like when they're on stage, it's all about posing. And the skill that they develop in practicing posing really creates mind muscle connection at a higher level. And they're able to fully contract and isolate the muscles that they want to without any weight at all, right? Just by simply flexing, contracting their body and holding the poses. And that's why a bodybuilder who practices posing is going to have a different look to their physique than someone who's just in the gym lifting weights without posing. So even practicing posing, like, you can go on YouTube and just like search for posing tutorial videos and stuff and try and practice it on your own. I mean, just the act of posing will help to develop that mind muscle connection and bring more awareness and sensory acuity into your workouts. And you'll find that has a huge impact. And I know myself, like when I was competing in bodybuilding, like just going through the posing practice, it took my workouts to another level. I mean, because it had so much more awareness and that mind muscle connection. It's almost like a sixth sense, if you will, right? So it really helps to amplify the whole process. So, I mean, those are some things that you can certainly work on. But rest assured that as you build up and as you become more developed, that mind muscle connection will improve. But you can certainly work on improving it now in the short term as well. We got Nathan joining in saying, "What's up?" What else we got there? John is saying, "I find a glass of milk fills you up once you've had your calories in that day if you feel a bit hungry." Sure, if you enjoy drinking milk and it sits well with your stomach, go for it. I personally, I'm not a big fan of milk anymore. I did drink it a lot when I was younger, but I find that milk, it's there's a lot of lactose in milk, and I like to choose lower lactose dairy products. In fact, a lot of people drink milk thinking that it's a good source of protein. Now, don't get me wrong, there is protein in milk, but there's more sugar than protein, right? If you look at the nutrition label, a cup of milk, there's approximately 12 grams of sugar, lactose, and there's about 8 grams of protein. And the fat will vary depending on whether it's full fat, semi skimmed, or skim milk. Excuse me. I have a sip of water or a sip of tea there. But bottom line, milk, if you're drinking it as a source of protein, you got to realize it's more sugar than protein. So I like to choose other forms of dairy products, and like Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, which are the complete opposite. In those cases, there's more protein than lactose. So I mean, it's a better ratio if you're looking for the protein. So again, I'm not saying you're not allowed to drink milk or anything like that, but I'm just kind of making you more aware of it. If you're using it as a source of protein, there's better options out there. We have I Am Ruckus joining in, says, "I appreciate the knowledge and I appreciate the comment. Thank you so much." What else we got there? Paul joining in. Paul Miller, great to see you. Fascinated by the idea of deloading that was mentioned. Yeah, that's a huge thing. And for those of you who are not familiar with Paul's a regular to our Muscle After 40 blueprint, and Paul's in Muscle After 60, right? He's the master, right? Muscle After 60, the senior competitor of our group, if you will, right? and he actually won a physique transformation contest just recently as well for in his age category, which was pretty cool to see. But myself and Paul, we did a video interview a while back sharing his fitness and fat loss transformation. So if you haven't already done so, go to my main YouTube channel page, and there in the Muscle After 40 Success Stories, there's one there. There's a video where myself and Paul Miller sit down and have a very insightful conversation. So if you haven't checked that out, it's certainly worth watching. A lot of value there. Who else we got there? Williams joining in again. Thank you for the helpful answer. You're very welcome, my friend. Okay, what else we got? Jonas is joining in. Welcome. Let's see. What do you think of calorie cycling versus linear diet? Is calorie cycling more flexible? I've done both, and it's just a different way of going about it. I mean, I'm not going to say one is right, wrong, good, or bad. It's just another variation. The idea behind calorie cycling, and I'll discuss some of the pros and cons behind it. One is a lot of people find it easy to do something for the short term, meaning like, hey, I can restrict myself for the short term. I can deal with a little bit of discomfort for the short term, but I don't want to deal with discomfort for the long term, right? So I'll give you an example of how I used to use calorie cycling back in my bodybuilding competition days. I used to go through a phase of high, medium, and low carbs. And this is quite common. And there's a lot of different variations of this. But generally speaking, this is how it works. You'd have a couple days of high carbohydrate and high calories. So like that would be maybe a slight calorie surplus for a couple days. Then I would go medium calories, medium carbs. And those days I would be at a slight calorie deficit, right? So I was just, and how I was manipulating my calories was the carbohydrate intake, right? So the high carb day, I'd have a serving of carbohydrates with every meal. The medium carb day, I basically have a serving of carbohydrates, maybe around my workout, like pre and post workout. And then the rest of the meals would be low carb. And then on the low carb, low calorie day, I would have no starchy carbohydrates at all, just basically protein and vegetables. So high, medium, low. That's how I would do it. High carbs for 2 days, medium carbs for 2 days, and then low carbs for 2 days, and just kind of repeat that cycle. And the idea behind it is you're almost like doing a mini version of a bulk and a cut all within the course of a week. So on those high calorie, high carb days, you're providing your body with a slight calorie surplus, and it helps to refill your glycogen stores, right? So you're topping up your glycogen, you're getting strength and energy, and everything's topped up, and you're feeling good. And then when you go into that medium carb day, you're in a slight calorie deficit. So you're starting to tap into burning some body fat, but you've got some reserves from those high calorie days. Then when you get into the low carb, low calorie days, you're into an aggressive fat loss, right? It's a big deficit, you're depleting, but you're only doing so for a short period of time. So you only suffer it out for a couple days before then you get to like go off the diet, if you will, and go back to the high calorie, high carb day. So it's like high, medium, low, switch back, high, medium, low. So you don't go for a prolonged period of time without having that refeed. And a lot of people like that mental break and the variety that it provides. All right. And I mean, that was something that I did for years through my bodybuilding competition days. I used to use that as a kind of like a foundation. And a lot of the coaching students that I work for utilized it. And it certainly does work, right? Don't get me wrong. I mean, it certainly does work. But you have to be very strict and organized with that structure, because if you screw it up, like let's just say you're on your high, your medium, your low, and then on your low day, you've got a birthday party or a social gathering or something, or your buddies want to go out for pizza and beer on a Friday night. And you're like, well, it's my low carb day, I shouldn't be doing this. But then you say, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway. Well, you just screwed up the whole cycle, right? So, I mean, you have to have that rigid structure in order to truly make it work. Now, with that being said, if you know in advance that you're going to be doing something, you can manipulate the days accordingly. Stretch them out, maybe like prolong the low carb days, or or prolong the medium carb days, or something like that, to kind of build in the flexibility. But it has that structure. It doesn't allow for just freedom to eat what you want when you want, right? You have to have that structure in place to truly make it work and to truly make it efficient. And another thing is, you still have to factor in the overall totals for the week, because even if you're cycling your calories, if you end the week in a calorie surplus, you're still not maximizing fat burning, because you got to look at it. It's long-term numbers. It's like, if you end the week in a surplus, you're still in a surplus, versus if you end the week in a deficit, you're still in a deficit. Like, it's the long term. It's what matters the most. And to give you an analogy of how this long-term perspective works, think of, let's just say we're talking about saving money, right? Like, let's just assume that you're very frugal, and you're clipping coupons, and you're not driving your car too much because the price of gas these days and all this kind of stuff, and you're very frugal with your money, and you're always making the best choices possible, and being economical and this and that and blah blah blah. So you're super frugal, but then you decide, hey, we're going to have a holiday down in Las Vegas, and I'm going to, enjoy myself in the casino. And then you just blow $10,000 on the slot machines. Well, that one weekend in Vegas could totally cancel out a full month of being frugal and clipping coupons and avoiding driving your car too much to save money on gas. Like, just because you were saving, if you have one big splurge, you just, destroyed all the savings, right? You just canceled it all out. Same applies when it comes to calorie cycling or anything like that. Like, you could be in a calorie deficit 6 days a week, right? And thinking, I'm super strict with my diet, but then one day on the weekend, you go out and have a big dirty binge and cheat meal or cheat day. And then you consume a massive calorie surplus on your cheat day. You could totally offset the progress you made throughout the rest of the week. So it's not just, what you do day by day, it's what you do over the long term. And the long-term averages make a difference. That's what has the biggest impact. So when it comes to calorie cycling, getting back to your question here, you have to know the total numbers. And this is where it can be a bit confusing, and you have to have a bigger picture perspective, because it's not just your daily calories and your daily macros, it's your weekly calories and your weekly macros. So it does require a bit more thought process and a bit more planning to truly make it work. But if you do, get it all figured out, and you make it work, it can be an effective strategy for sure. So again, it's not right, wrong, good or bad or anything like that. It's just another strategy that you have available. It's another tool in the toolbox, if you will. Personally, I prefer to keep it more simple, and instead of going through this, cycling my calories and stuff like that, I do it on a day-to-day basis. So I eat for what I'm going to be doing that day. And I'm very flexible. So if I know I'm going to be having a very high activity day, like maybe we're going for a big bike ride and I'm going to be burning 2,000 plus calories on that big bike ride, well, I'm going to make sure that I'm getting an extra 2,000 calories into my nutrition plan that day to compensate for that. Versus if I'm having a rest day, well, I'm not going to eat as much because I'm not burning as much. So I like to manipulate my calories based on what I'm doing that day in the moment, versus having this pre-planned weekly structure of high, medium, low, and then having to manipulate it accordingly and have that structured and planned into the week accordingly in order to make it work. So I don't know, it's probably probably more detail than you wanted, but hopefully it made sense. All right, moving on. What else we got there? I think that pretty much covers all the questions that came through there, and it actually works out well because we've been going for an hour and 9 minutes. So I told you I'm going to be doing this video chat for about an hour. So I'm going to get ready and clue it up. So guys, hopefully you found this video chat helpful. Hopefully you got some insights from it. And if you did, all right, please let me know. Give me a thumbs up. Leave me your comments and feedback down in the comment section below. One more question came through. Edits says, how long have you been working out? I started working out back in 1990. That's when I started a formal structured program with my father. He's the one who started me training. at the tender age of 12. So I started working out in 1990 at the age of 12. But before then, I was involved with martial arts and other sports, but it wasn't structured weight training. But weight training, my first official workout was 1990, which seems like a long time ago now. Yeah. But anyway, that's that was the answer for that one. But I'm going to clue it up now. So again, guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video chat. If you do have any questions, comments, or you wanted to elaborate on stuff that we discussed already, feel free to email me. I've got my email address down in the description below. And if you would like some help with a personalized fitness and nutrition program, feel free to reach out. We can book in for a one-on-one strategy session call where we can jump on the phone or jump on a Zoom call and basically just discuss you, your situation, your goals, what it is you're trying to achieve, and we can brainstorm some action steps and see if we can come up with a realistic action plan to help you reach your fitness and fat loss goals. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to reach out to me. And again, I have all the details down in the description below. Open that up. All the details are there. All right, guys, I'm going to clue it up. Have yourself a wonderful weekend. And for those of you in the United States, I know you have a long weekend, so enjoy. And I'll talk to you next week, same time, same place. Take care. Over and out.